everybody. Today I'm doing a shir on the Kiyor, which is the keli of the woman's donation. And the shir is Li'ilui Nishmas, my nephew, Uri Nissen, Olav Shalom Ben, Nachum Mendel, Sheyichya. And I just find it very fascinating, the whole concept of Kiyor. And you're welcome to ask questions. It's a dialogue, it's not a monologue, but I'm going to start with the Nigla and the Medrash, and then we're going to move on to what the Rebbe has to say on the topic. So whoever would like the handouts, they will be provided in the right underneath the audio or the video or the podcast. There'll be a link to the handouts that will be made available. But for today, you can just listen in. So we will begin with a pasuk in Parshas Vayakhel that talks about the Kiyor, and the pasuk says, "Vayas es Kiyor," and he made the Kiyor nechayshus out of copper, veskanai in its base, nechayshus out of copper. And what was the Kiyor made out of? The maris atzayvais, from the mirrors of the woman who had set up legions. Maris is mirrors, and atzayvais is the women who set up, like tzava, legions of armies. That refers to the many children that they created through these mirrors. Asher tzavu pesach oyel made, that those women, in this context, the word tzavu, according to Rashi, is congregated at the entrance of the oyel mayet. And now Rashi quotes from the Medrash Tanchuma. What happened with those mirrors? What was the story behind the mirrors? So let's read Rashi. The maris atzayvais, b'nais Yisrael hoyu b'yadan maris. The Jewish women at the time of Mitzrayim, they had mirrors. Shayroyis behen kashein miskashtais. They would look inside the mirrors when they would beautify themselves and adorn themselves. And even those mirrors, they didn't withhold from bringing as a donation to the Mishkan. Moshe actually was repulsed by them and he rejected them because they were made for temptation. To inspire lustful thoughts, so to speak. And the Eibusha told Moshe, Kabel, please receive those mirrors, accept them. Because these mirrors are more dear to me than everything else. Why? Because through those mirrors, through the women adorning themselves, like we'll soon see Rashi will quote the Medrash, through those mirrors, the woman established, they created, they gave birth to many legions, many children in Mitzrayim. And how did this work? When their husbands were tired from the backbreaking labor in Mitzrayim, the women would go, they first brought their husbands food and drink. That's such an important part. We're so busy talking about the mirrors, but good food is always a bonus. And then after they fed them, they took those mirrors. And everyone looked inside that mirror together with their husbands, and they kind of seduced them with words, saying, I'm prettier than you. And through their words of love and connection, through these conversations and beautifying themselves and following conversations, they brought their husbands to desire, and then they had their union, and they got pregnant, and they actually gave birth, like the pasuk says in Shir Hashirim, I gave birth to you under the apple trees. And then the Medrash there continues to say how what Hashem did with those children and how he fed them and he saved them through the Malachim. And that's what it means, V'zel Shanemar, and this is what the pasuk refers to when the pasuk says, B'maris hatzayvais, with the mirrors of the tzayvais. And what happened with those mirrors when Moshe received and accepted their donation? V'nasa hakir mehem, the kir, the wash basin, was made out of this mirror. Why? Because just like the women in Mitzrayim used the mirrors to create peace and harmony and excitement and connection between husband and wife, this Kiyor would in the future again resolve Shalom Bayis issues and reinstate healthy Shalom Bayis between husband and wife. The Kiyor, those mirrors, was an object that was the goal of this object was to create or reinstate peace between husband and wife. In what context? We know if there was a Isha Saita, there was a woman that was warned by her husband not to be alone with a man, and they were alone. And then al pi halacha, she's suspected of perhaps being immoral with this other man. And husband and wife cannot live together as husband and wife until this is cleared, this is clarified. So he brought her to the Mishkan or to the Beis Hamikdash. Then she would drink from the waters of the Kiyor, that of course Hashem's name actually was erased in those waters. And then Shalom Bayis was able to be restored because she was hopefully found innocent. Beteda lecha, and you should know, shehein maris mamish, they were literally the same mirrors. And what is the proof? And Rashi continues to say, because in Parashas Pikudei we have a list of the exact amount of donations, how much gold, how much silver, how much copper was donated to the Mishkan, and exactly each keli was made with X amount of copper, X amount of silver, X amount of gold. And if you added everything up, there was no accountability. The sum total of the copper already was covered by all the other kelim that were made out of copper, and there was no extra copper, and there was no accountability, or nothing was calculated to include the copper mirrors that were used for the copper that was used for the Kiyor. So we learn from here that the only copper that was used for the keli called the Kiyor was the copper of the mirrors that the women donated separately, and that was used for the special Kiyor. And then the Rebbe continues, the Rashi continues with a few other little details. So before we expound on what the Rebbe has to say on this beautiful concept, I want to explain that the Mefarshim, actually, the Medrash and different Mefarshim, with different explanations of mirrors and why it was copper, and what does the word tzavu mean, and why does it say Pesach, and why does it say oil, and why does it say mayit, almost every word of this pasuk, the Mefarshim teach us, is another pointer to point to the tznius of the woman in that generation. And the whole Kiyor, the whole purpose of the Kiyor, and the whole point of the Kiyor was to emphasize the tznius of the Jewish woman. So as we're now going to sift through some Mefarshim that I collected, but it was very interesting when I looked at the Medrash Tanchuma, and Rashi almost copy-paste word for word, but it was very interesting to me that a few words were deleted in Rashi. And what were those few words? So when the Medrash says how they fed their husbands and made themselves beautiful and got into conversations with their husbands, and then they had children from it, the Medrash Tanchuma actually says a miracle. And these are the words, V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu Paiktam Ga'alter. They got pregnant right away. That was miraculous, which means Hashem played along, or he helped with this behavior, that these women had such mysterious nefesh to create children. And at a time where logically it almost didn't make sense. The men were tired. They were just not interested. They weren't even able to go home, as we'll see soon in the Medrash Rabbah. But these women had that faith and had that mission, and Hashem helped them along, that every one of those women actually became pregnant at that time, which I thought was interesting. And I don't know why Rashi didn't include that, but it was when I had when I taught this a few days ago to some girls, some seminary girls. It's very interesting because they had a whole discussion, and I didn't see anywhere if it says in Medrash, but it came up like, did they only do this once and got pregnant and never came back again, or was this an ongoing situation? And I was wondering if perhaps because we talked about this Mitzvah Einon, the Mitzvah Purvu, and it doesn't say anything anywhere, but it was a discussion. But the fact that the Eibusher made that miracle, I think to me is fabulous. I want to add now something more that the Medrash Rabbah says. It's something that it was so fascinating to me. So the Medrash Rabbah says, Arba Gezeiros Gazer Aleim. Parai decreed 4 decrees upon the Jewish people. And in the beginning, what was the first decree? That, when the Yidden had to do hard work, Pari appointed overseers over them. And these overseers were responsible to make sure that the exact quota was filled by the hardworking Jewish people. And they had to press them and push them to fill that quota. And part of that, in order to be able to do that, the overseers made this decision, the workers should not go home to their own houses to go to sleep. And that was the excuse they gave. Like the overseers told the Jewish people, the men, if you're going to go home to sleep, till we're going to go collect you in the morning to come back to work. It's going to take 1 hour, take 2 hours. You won't be able to fulfill the quota, and therefore we impose upon you this decree that you have to stay and sleep. You have to come and sleep on the ground. You can't go home to go to sleep. But the Medrash says that was just an excuse. Pari's real motivation for disallowing the hardworking Jewish people from going home at night is because his real intention was, if they don't go home at night, then the Yidden will multiply. So how does the Eibishter respond? Amar lahem Elokim. So the Eibishter says, Ani amarti la'Avram avihem sh'ani mar b'banav k'kechavim. I already promised Avram Avinu that I'm going to multiply their children like the stars, like the pasuk says, and so on. The Eibishter already made a decree, made a promise that he's going to multiply the Yidden. And Hashem says, you think you're going to outsmart them and cause them not to multiply? Let's see who's gonna where the truth will be. What's gonna come of it? Is it gonna be my truth or your gezerah? And right away, the women actually saved the day. And Rabbi Akiva continues to say that in the Schar, these women saved the day, and they actually, it says how Hashem helped them along. We said they got pregnant right away, but even before that, they wanted to bring their husbands very good food. So they went with their pails to get fish. And when they went to draw water with fish inside, Hashem actually prepared for them and made it happen. And then when they pulled out the water, there was very good fish, a lot of good fish that came along. And then the Medrash continues to say they brought half water and half fish, and they brought it to their husbands, and they brought to their lips 2 pots, one of hot water and one of fish. And after they fed them, the Medrash continues to say, then the women washed the men. They were in the field, sleeping on the ground, working hard, full of schwitz. So they washed them, and they smeared them with nice oils, and they gave them good water to drink. And after that, of course, when they lifted their spirits with from their husbands, then they actually were together with them, and they couldn't even go home, but they were together with them, like it says, Bein Shvatayim, which is in the trenches, in the edges, in the most hidden places. They actually were together with them, and then they were able to produce those children. So the next part, I want to explain to you other ideas from different Mefarshim about how these women and the whole Kiyor was to prove the tznius of the woman. So first, there's before we get to the tznius, the Sifsei Koyin on Shmois Perek Amud Ches Pasuk Ches actually asks the question: why were they made out of copper, and why did they not use glass, like as a standard mirrors? So first, he says that really the women wanted to make the mirrors with iron or steel, because then it could be magnified. And what could be magnified? What did they want to magnify? So it's very interesting how the place of the Kiyor, they placed the Kiyor in the Mishkan to fulfill a separate purpose. And that is that the women wanted to come and they wanted to know and wanted to be part of what was going on in the Mishkan. Or before there was the actual Oyhel Moed, which refers to the Mishkan, the Oyhel Moed refers to Moshe Rabbeinu's tent, where the Jewish people gathered together to learn Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu. But because they wanted to be tznius and they didn't want to mingle with the men, they placed the Kiyor so that it says they wanted Lirai Seder HaAvodah VaTfilos BeBeis HaMikdash. They wanted to see the Avodah and the Tfilos in the Beis HaMikdash, or what was going on by Moshe Rabbeinu. But the Asr Leilech Ben Hanashim, they didn't want to walk between the men. Therefore, they placed the Kiyor at that specific spot with mirrors, because they looked into the mirrors, and through the mirrors, they will be able to see the reflection of what was going on in the Mishkan or in the Oyhel Moed. So really, they figured if the whole point is that the women could be part of the experience without mingling with men through seeing what was going on through the reflection, they had a thought to really make it out of steel or out of iron in a way that because that would magnify, they were able to see it better. But when they learned that, when they learned that Hashem did not want iron or that type of metal to be collected for the donation for the Mishkan, the Abshur does not like Barzel because it's made to kill. So they had to instead make it out of copper. And not only copper, it was most shiny copper. And why didn't they make it out of glass? For a simple reason. Because they knew in the Mishkan they had to travel from one place to another. And you know that if glass is going to move from one place to another, it'll shatter. So for practical reasons, it was made out of copper. So this is very interesting because originally, if the mirrors weren't glass, we know that they were copper mirrors. I would think so. But they made the copper was so shiny that it reflected back as mirrors do. So here we discussed that the women wanted to be tznius, so they didn't want to mingle with the men, so they had to wait to see what was going on with the reflection. There's another stream of farshim, Moshe Skenim, Rekanti, and also over here in Sefer Kuti Torah, not from the Alter Rebbe, and Vayakel and Vayikra and in Shmos, and three different sources. They explain the reverse. That in order for a carbon to be valid, the kohen actually had to have kavanah that this carbon belongs to this yid, and when they not only when they brought the carbon, but also when they spritzed the blood, it had to be lishma, and the kohen had to have a real awareness that this carbon is going to be mechaper, is going to forgive for this specific yid. In fact, one of the first say he actually had to look at the yid's face. It says, "B'shas hakravas hakarbon hayakoyin makir b'fanav mokim shepogam l'machshavtoi." When a kohen would bring the carbon, he had to look at the yid and he had to recognize or ascertain the exact place that corresponded to that sin and what was going on in the yid's mind. And when the kohen would actually look at the yid in that way, he was able to cleanse him from his sin. But it's also to stare at a woman's face, and therefore we put the kiyor there so that the kohen could be able to bring forgiveness to the Jewish women without staring at their faces, but actually doing it through the reflection of the mirror of the kiyor. So that's another point. And here we have actually another point from the Zohar, very interesting, that it says, Tana Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia actually taught us this. Why did the women merit to this? What was this? Every other keli in the Beis HaMikdash was made out of a collection of donations. All the Yidden, men and women and children, pooled their donations together, and collectively the different kelim were made. This is unique. It's the only keli that we have in the Mishkan that was made only from the women's donations and nobody else. So why were they zeicha to have like a female keli, so to speak, in the Mishkan, and we don't have an equivalent for an only male keli, for example? So this is what the Zohar says: Mishum sheshamru atzman b'golus Mitzrayim. The entire time that they were golus Mitzrayim, they kept their tznius, they kept their faithfulness, that even though the men were sleeping in the field for years, not just for days, this was 210 years. For all that time, every single woman, of course, except for Shlomis Bas Divri, because she's the one who taught us this lesson, for all those years, they kept themselves 100% pure. And then the Zohar continues to say, Shela'achar shenitaru, after they purify themselves, which sounds like they used the mikvah, they made themselves first pure. Only after that, they used the mirrors to adorn themselves. They came and adorned themselves. And only after they made themselves pure, they made themselves beautiful, and they looked in the mirrors to entice their husbands. And they aroused them in order to create more children. I just thought the wording was quite beautiful, so I wanted to share with you. Then we have over here something fascinating. Number one, another reason why it was made of copper. So to understand this, we already explained earlier that from the Medrash Tanchuma that this kiyor was used to restore shalom bayis. But the Kiyor adds another detail, that it's not only to restore shalom bayis, but he says, just like the women in Mitzrayim, those women who donated the mirrors, that just like we are pure and innocent because we held to our tznius throughout the entire time, so too the waters of the Kiyor will find these women that they are becheskas kashrus, that they're absolutely innocent through this Kiyor. And that's why it was nechoshes. Why? Because there's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, and there's another pasuk in Yeshayahu, in connection with a woman who's immoral, a zoina. And in both cases, as part of her immoral behavior, she's described. One is umetzach isha zoina hayalacha. You had the brazenness. Metzach means forehead, but it means the brazenness of a immoral woman, like it says, umitzchech nechusha. And your forehead is of copper. A copper forehead is a terminology that's used for chutzpah, for azus metzach, for chutzpah or brazenness, because in order for a woman to be immoral, she has to have a certain amount of brazenness. And we know that if chas v'shalom, the women would have sinned with copper mirrors and been brazen in a negative way, then ein kategar nasa senegar. Kiyor says if the copper that the women donated would be a reflection of the woman's brazenness, chas v'shalom, in a negative way, it would never be a keli used to actually defend a woman that wasn't brazen, that was pure. So the women actually brought the copper to show that this is pure copper. This is not chas v'shalom, a copper of a woman in a negative state, but this is a copper that we used our strength to uphold our purity, and it will also give witness, it will bear witness that the Isha Saita is also pure. And another explanation the Kiyor gives is the same thing as about water. Just like a mirror is reflective and says the truth, when you look in the mirror, you actually see how fat your face is. Excuse me. The other day, I was put in a room full of mirrors to teach a group of girls, and it's bad enough, it's hard enough when you teach by Zoom and look at your own face and stare at it. Now, could you imagine, all of a sudden, you see yourself fully the whole time? It could be a little distracting because you're so beautiful. No. I see over here Rifki. I have great body image. I hope I didn't scare you away. Where is she? Could you laugh at least? I see somebody's hands, and I see somebody's mask, and I see a lot of names and beautiful images, but without teaching real people, it does get a bit challenging. And especially if this is not even a podcast style, nobody's even asking me one question. So my voice has to kind of drone on and on and on. So if somebody wants to ask me something, but just might make it a bit more interesting, but I'll just continue going because it's taking a very long time, and let me talk faster. And whoever's watching on double speed, Now you probably want to do it down to 1.5 because I'm going to start talking really, really fast. So the Kliyakar brings, just like water is reflective, so too the women, and it says the truth, so too the Kiyor will say the truth. But then it's very interesting. Kliyakar continues to say something fascinating. Why it says in the pasuk, Pesach Oyhel Moyed, because the word Oyhel is supposed to remind us of tznius. How does Oyhel remind us of tznius? Who would like to say? You could chat. About who does it say? Hine Oyhel. Sara Imenu. Thank you so much. When we see the word Oyhel, it's supposed to remind us of tznius, because when the Malachim wanted to bring out the beauty and the value of Sara Imenu to Avram, her husband, they focused on the fact that she was in a tent because she was tznius. So the word Oyhel is supposed to remind us of tznius. The word Pesach is supposed to remind us that a woman who wants to be immoral, she doesn't stay at the door of her own tent. Like in the reference of Tamar, the pasuk says, where does she go if she wants to find immorality? Vateshev b'Pesach Einoyim. She stood at the opening of the crossroads. But our women here in Mitzrayim, or the women in the Midbar, they didn't stand at crossroads. Pesach, Oyel, they stood in their own homes in Mitzrayim, and they didn't go out to see what's going on by others. They retained their tznius. And Moyed means meeting, and according to Kliyakar, the women would only meet their husbands actually in their own homes. It doesn't say that they met them out elsewhere, but they did not meet men anywhere else except for their own husbands that they waited to meet in their very own tents. And now I want to bring another fascinating point, and this is from Targum Yonasan. And I'm going to read the Aramaic, and I want to thank my husband and my sons for giving me the translation, and I hope I do it right. And here's how first the Targum Yerushalmi, when it translates into Aramaic, the Maris Atzaves, which we say the mirrors of the women who congregated or who created those legions of Jewish people, of Jewish children. And he says right away, not just women, and right away the Targum Yerushalmi says, Dinashaya tzadikosa, they were righteous women. Right away we insert a positive. And so too, Targum Yonasan says, V'avad yas Kiyor, and he made the Kiyor, the Nechash, out of copper, v'yas basise, and its base, the Nechash, out of copper, min aspak liri, Nechasha, from the copper mirrors, and right away he inserts Nishayat Sniyusa, from the tzniistika woman. And when he describes them, they came to do the service at the Oyel Moyed. What service did they do? So he says they came to bring the carbon of the yoldus, of giving birth, and they cleared themselves. They were matar themselves from the blood of birth. And the parish says right away, you should know, shahayasham keli im hakir. Next to the kiyor, there was a keli, uvoy mayim kishir hatvila, and in that keli there was water for the amount that they needed to toivel, like a pool that Shlomo Melech made in the Beis Hamikdash for the purpose of tvila. When the women came to the Mishkan or to the Beis Hamikdash or wherever where there was a place that they could toivel, I assume it's only in the Midbar. I assume it's not in the Beis Hamikdash, but I don't know. When they would toivel, it was one of their ways that they did their avodas Hashem, and therefore the Onkelos translates that they came at the side of the Mishkan to do avodah with Tzala, to do avodas Hashem, because they came to toivel, and that was their way of avodas Hashem. So the Mefarshim on this Medrash, the Yalkut of the Medrash, actually talk a little bit more about this, that the Kiyor was connected to Tvila. And there's a whole back and forth, because here it says that the women at times did toivel in the Midbar. And really, how did they toivel? It's a desert, because the Be'er of Miriam was a well, was a living water of well water, spring water, a living spring. And even though it moved around, but because it was usually we don't have this in the Gashmias of Olam Hazeh. The wells move around; they're connected to under the ground. But Hashem, it says, this is actually a kosher wellspring for a mikvah. It was created from Hashem himself. And because it moved around, it was a proof that was clearly from the Eibishter, and this definitely was how the women toiveled. And from this well water of Miriam, it was somehow connected or extended to near the Kiyor or somewhere around the Kiyor, and they were able to toivel. Now there's a whole discussion in the Mefarshim, what did they toivel from? Because it's fascinating. From Matan Torah, Tuma was removed, and there was no Tumas Nida anymore. So what did they toivel from? So one pair says they could toivel from a Tumas Sheretz if there was a dead, how do you call it? One of those dead animals that make you tamei, and so on and so forth. But the other pair said that not necessarily were they tameos, but every woman who came to help with the work of the Beis Hamikdash, of building the Mishkan, they wove the curtains. Each one of them toiveled before for extra Torah before they began doing the work of weaving the curtains for the Oyel Moed. And there's a remez, but if you look in the pasuk, it says that the woman who was Chachmas Leiv, Biyodeha Tavu, and Leiv Biyodeha Tavu, Tavu means they wove, Leiv Biyodeha Tavu, Rosh Tevis Taval, the Ram, the Vez, and the Test. It's a remez that they toiveled before they handled the material and when they helped with the building of the Mishkan. Now, the other parish says the opposite, that as soon as they sinned with the golden calf, which definitely happened before the Mishkan was built, the Tumas Nida returned, the Tuma returned, and they had to, the Tumas Nida returned, and they had to toivel themselves from time to time. We're still going to go back to here, and there's different references now that explain what the word tsovu means, asher tsovu. So we already explained they congregated. That was according to the translation that Rashi brings. There's another translation here, and we will bring it perhaps in another parish, but maybe not, because I didn't realize how long this is going to take. So maybe I'll say it Baal Peh. And the parish brings actually a pasuk in Daniel that the word tsava or tzava in Aramaic refers to wanted. That these women desired or they wanted very badly to be part of the Avodah in the Oyel Moed, be it what was going on in Moshe Rabbeinu's tent, be it what was going on in the Mishkan, that it comes from the Lashon desire. Another parish is that the word Sava comes like from army, from service, that they wanted to serve Hashem. And it's connected also to an army. What happens to an army? We set up camp in one place, but then they get marching orders and they march from one place to another. The same thing, the women, they marched. They did this service, this type of army service, that instead of staying in their own homes and being busy with their own personal lives, they moved over, and for extra kedusha, for extra religious enthusiasm and connection to the Eibishter, they moved over and they were very much part of what was going on, either again in the Oyel Moed, again, be it what Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching, or be it in the Mishkan. And it is connected because over here the parish says that they actually worked very hard. Tsava means an army. They had an inner struggle, an inner battle, and they chose to overcome their own personal desires of self-beautification. And instead, they moved over and they marched towards beautifying their ruchnius and moving forward in their avodas Hashem. So we will actually post the sources where you will find them at the right time. Before we get to the Rebbe Sicha, there was one more thing that I found fascinating, which until now we said that Moshe Rabbeinu did not want to accept these mirrors because he felt they were used for lustful thoughts or the Yetzer Hara. We have another two perushim why Moshe was not so fond of the mirrors for halachic reasons. One is that when the Kahanim had to wash their feet, they had to bend down, and you're not supposed to bow down to your own reflection. Another thing that's mentioned is that because really we know the way the Mishkan was set up. There was the Chatzar, where there was the public Avodah, but then there was the Heichal, where only the Kahanim went inside, and there was an entrance, but it wasn't open for full view. And then, of course, we had the Kodesh Gedashim behind the Parechas. So the way the mirror stood, it made it quite easy for the Yidden to see a reflection of what the Kahanim were doing in the Heichal. And Moshe Rabbeinu felt this wasn't really proper because that was really a private area and shouldn't have been exposed in a way that Yidden could really see what was going on. Again, I'm just quoting. I'm not making any drushes. One more point, and this is from Bamidbar Rabbah, that when it says Asher Tzovu Pesach Oyehol Moyed, Moyed means Edus. Edus means that this Kiyor is testifying that all the years that the women in Mitzrayim, they were 100% tznius and pure. So so we have to put the parentheses and the commas a little differently when we get to this point that Moyed is, again, saying witness or testimony that the women were all Kedoshis and Tahiris and Snuis. Okay, so now we have the background from Nigla, different mafarshim about the Kiyor, and I hope it was appreciated. Again, I'm talking to names and still, how do you call it, still faces. I hope it was appreciated. Hi, Mati. So nice to see you. Thank you so much. So that is Nigla. But now we're going to learn what the Rebbe says. So there's a sikha in Cheluk Vav, Parshas Kisisa, with such a fascinating medrash. And it's so reflective of the Hayom Yom of today, which is Tes Zayin Adar Rishon. And I don't have the Hayom Yom in front of me. If one of you want to bring the Hayom Yom and read it in Lashon Kodesh and in Yiddish, that would be fabulous. When you're ready, you could raise your hand, because it definitely is a precursor and a kind of statement, a conclusive statement, the statement of conclusion of what the Sikha talks about. So because of the limitations of time, I'm going to say the preface very short. And the Rebbe mentions something unique about the Kiyor. The Kiyor in Halacha had to have enough water that 4 Kohanim could wash themselves, sanctify themselves, their hands and their feet at the same time. Why 4? Because when the Mishkan was set up, there was Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron, and his 2 sons. Now, during the 7 days, the week before Rosh Chodesh, there was also there was another 2 sons of Aaron, but because they passed away, they're not included in this cheshbon. But the truth of the matter is that afterwards, once Moshe did it the last time, in the continuation, Moshe wasn't a kohen. So what the Rebbe asks, yes, it was Aaron and his 2 sons. Why do we also include Moshe Rabbeinu in the calculation in halacha that a Kiyor has to include Moshe Rabbeinu in the equation? Number 2, another point, the Kiyor is not counted as one of the kelim. It's not talked about in Parshas Truma with the kelim or Tetzavev, the Mizbech Hazak. It's totally not talked about. Only later on in Kisisa and Vayakel, we mentioned the Kiyor, because it wasn't a keli that was used for a mitzvah, for the avodah. There was all the other kelim, there was a mitzvah connected to it. You bring a carbon, you light the menorah, the shulchan, the guitarist, whatever it is. But the Kiyor is like hechsher mitzvah or hachanoga mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah itself. It's a keli that's used to prepare us for a mitzvah. So we have to understand, is there a value, or what will be the value of a value of preparing for a mitzvah? So as we do in the Rebbe Sichos, first we go on a tangent, and then of course we're going to tie everything together. Those of us are familiar with the way the Rebbe teaches. So we said on one hand, it's a Chanukah mitzvah, and then the Rebbe continues to say, like we mentioned before, this concept that the mirrors, when the women use the mirrors, it could have easily, like Moshe Rabbeinu, interpreted as a murky thing. It's used for lustful thoughts, to create a taiva. It's not clear. Is this kedusha or is it not? It's not straight out. So to explain this, and I actually have, I found a footnote based on from the Sikha in Lokutei Torah. So I'm going to do it first because you will see how everything ties in together. So I don't know if any of you ever tested your younger brother or your bar mitzvah boy on the bar mitzvah mimer, and you learned this concept of there is aspaklaria hameira, which is a piece of glass that you could see right through with clarity, a very clear glass, and you see right through, the light shines right through, and you can see very clearly what's going on the other side. And then there's aspaklaria she'eino meira, which is a glass that you cannot see through. Why cannot you see through? Why can you not see through the glass? Because behind this glass was smeared some sort of metal, which is called a mirror. And now you cannot see through it. You see a reflection. But that means you see yourself as a reflection. You don't see anything real. If you look at the mirror, you only see a reflection. So this actually resembles two categories of Avodas Hashem. We have a clear glass that shines right, the light shines that right through, and that's the clarity. When we do a mitzvah, that's clear, that's beautiful, you follow the rules, you follow the formula, and it makes Hashem's name beautiful. You see it with your open eyes, there's no question, everything is done according to Hashem's instructions. And that's when we see the Kedusha clearly. Then there's another type of Avodas Hashem, which is when it's unclear. Rifki, today's a Yom Yom, and I asked somebody to read it. You're right, and I'm waiting for somebody to come forward. What is the Avodas Hashem of Espaklaria She'eino Meira? It's when it's not so clear. Either because this particular item or value or object or space or time is not a clear mitzvah. And we have a choice. We can either incorporate it and elevate it, or it can very easily draw us down or be drawn the other way. I'd like to give the example maybe of music. What means kosher music? You know, not every house and not every child and not every yid, it will be the same. What could be beautiful and so kosher and holy and an upgrade for one home could be a downgrade for another. This is the murky stuff. It's not so clear. There's no formula here at all. Or it could include when there's a yetzer hara, when there's a struggle, when it's not simple, and the mitzvah maybe doesn't come out so beautiful because you struggled, and all you're able to do is this little bit. So we have what's called iskafia, when there's a struggle there. It's not an easy mitzvah. It doesn't come easy. And we could do what we could do, but we can't do more because it's just not working right now. It's a challenge. Or ishapcha, when we take something that could have been used for a negative idea or a negative space, like the mirrors in Mitzrayim, and then we convert them and we elevate them to something really, really holy. So says the Eibishter in Kuti Torah, which one is more valued by the Eibishter? Not when it's clear, when it's murky and difficult and challenging and confusing. And we don't know. And we have no idea which way this is going to go. And we take the moment and the time and we say, Eibishter, this is for you. This avodah of then, again, you don't see the real thing. It's hard to see the real thing. If somebody's watching it, they don't see the real Kedusha in it. They don't know what's going on underneath. And sometimes we're confused ourselves. But Hashem knows the truth. So it's not the clarity. It's not the type of glass that the light of Hashem shines right through. And when we look, it's a reflection. It's not the real me that I see in the mirror. I'm so confused. I don't know. But Chassidus explains that this Or Chayzer, this reflective type of light, is a deeper connection, is a deeper type of holiness that's drawn down through the Or Chayzer, through the mirror, than through the clear glass. And here in Likutei Torah is connected to the role of the woman, parenthetically, and unfortunately, I did not have time yet to look up that reference. But it says over here, what I explained earlier, al pasuk esaloi ezer kenegdoi. So obviously, and the Rebbe will explain in another sikha, the female role. This is really the female role, which is so. I had a whole discussion with some woman about it a while ago. That most of our life, like a man has a minyan 3 times a day, and the tefillin, he has that the mitzvahs that come with formulas. Most of our lives are surrounded with preparing for Shabbos, creating the home, creating the environment when there is no clear formula, and we take our koiches and we take our experiences and we take our unique family members, rooms, situations, and one by one we elevate it for the Eibishter. This is the real Kedusha. This is the higher level Kedusha that's brought down. But when Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to build the Mishkan, which was a dir b'tachtainim, because Moshe Rabbeinu's level of nevuah was zeh, his nevuah had a very clear vision of the Eibishter, versus most other Nevi'im, it was not zeh, it was kai, like without that clarity. So because Moshe Rabbeinu's essential makeup was the clarity of Hashem's presence, he felt that to make that dir b'tachtainim, what could only be incorporated in the Mishkan, whatever Hashem clearly told us to bring, only what has that formula and the command of Hashem, that's the only thing that we can elevate. But Hashem says, Moshe Rabbeinu, no. Not only are you going to accept this other level of Avodah, but it's such a high level that before any Kohen could even begin their Avodah, they have to first value this Avodah of when you have to remove the mud. You're in a muddy place. You're in a dirty place. It's not a holy, clear place. It's not, the essential makeup is not clear and holy. It's challenging. It's difficult. It's gray. And we don't know if it's white gray, black gray, medium gray, and all the different shades. And when a Yid makes that choice, like the women in Mitzrayim did, they did something innovative. They did something unusual because in their life, in their situation, they had to do something different. Hashem did not give a command. Vayitzav Hashem es neshos Yisrael, and Hashem commanded the Jewish woman, I don't know how you say it in Lashon Nekeva, I don't know, go to your husbands, beautify yourselves, create the Jewish nation. There was no command. But from their hearts, they were innovative and they took a negative situation and they did it perhaps in a manner that not every Jewish woman today is going to their husband's place of work and using mirrors and whatever it is. It's not like a script. But Baruch Hashem, but through their extreme amunas Hashem, they created this. And the Rebbe continues to explain that this avodah requires a deep element of Kabbalah's oil or Yir Shemayim. Again, this doesn't come from knowledge, from more information. It's not like more information will give us the answer. We have a certain basic tamimistic Kabbalah's oil that connects us to the Eibishter, and that's what Moshe Rabbeinu teaches us. Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation teaches us how to have that bittul to the Eibishter and how to have that bittul to the Eibishter and that commitment to bring Hashem in every time and in every space. And like the Rebbe says in a footnote, once the Eibishter commanded Moshe Rabbeinu receive it, this type of avodah, of the mirror avodah, the not clear, has a bonus. That because Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded to welcome it, now the results are we get both the pluses of both. We get the positive effects of Moshe Rabbeinu's original, the Zeh avodah, the clear avodah, and of course we get this benefit of the unclear avodah. In another sikha, which is Purim Tavshin Chaf, in the other shir I said Chaf Beis, it was a mistake. It's Purim Tavshin Chaf. In Teres Menachem Cheluk Chaf Zayin, you'll find it on page 471. And you have to look through this whole entire sikha. But of course, the Rebbe explains that now we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. Okay, ladies, I have a hard time reading a chat while I'm teaching. So afterwards, I'll leave time for questions and answers. Unmute yourself. I don't know if I have to press a button or raise your hand or whatever it is, and we'll get there. But things are coming in, but I'm getting too disoriented for now. In another 5 minutes, hopefully, I'll be done with the shir, maybe 10. You know, sometimes I underestimate. And then we'll take time for discussion and insight and questions. And somebody could read the Hayom Yom, please, because it's definitely today's Hayom Yom, which is such amazing hashgacha pratis. So the Rebbe adds in that sikha that nowadays we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. Every home is a Beis HaMikdash. Every home is the Jewish v'shachanti b'soicham. And whose donation is the avodah of the Kiyor, the women's donation. Up until today, the woman's avodah in the home is the avodah of washing away the hands and the feet. Hands and the feet are the parts of our body that come in contact with Olam Hazeh. So what's the job as a woman? Any object, any idea, any value, like the Rebbe says here, we have to discern, is this mud and it does not belong in our Mishkan? Or is this something that we can incorporate and elevate for Avodas Hashem, including in our bedrooms? Is this allowed? Is that allowed? Is this okay? Is that okay? Should we use this? Should we use that? It's our Avodah to make that discernment. How do we discern? So the Rebbe says, the Avodah of the Kiyor is we wash with water. What's water? Water is Torah. And the Rebbe says, furthermore, water is Torah Chassidus, because it says, the world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem. When Mashiach comes, like the water fills the ocean bed. So water is associated with knowledge of Hashem, which is Torah Chassidus. So if a woman is connected to her emunas Hashem and avas Hashem and her yiras Hashem, her inner essence, which she nurtures through toiveling in water, through immersing herself in Torah and in Torah Chassidus, she will be able to discern what's right for her Beis HaMikdash. Every woman, like the Rebbe says, tune into your neshama. What is your neshama telling you? We nurture our neshama, just like the mitzvah of Tefillah. The Rebbe here brings a quote from the Rambam at the end of the laws of Tefillah, the laws of mikvahs, that Tefillah, of course, is to be mitar, to purify a Jew, that his guf changes from the status of tamei to the status of tahar. But the Rambam continues to say that the avodah of Tefillah also is symbolic, that every single yid can purify themselves and elevate and be more connected to their neshama by immersing themselves in what he calls mehadas, tahar, the water of knowledge of the Eibishter. And as us women, that's so essential that we should, and the Rebbe then continues to say that Moshe Rabbeinu is the level of da'as. And on the level of da'as, which is information, remember that Moshe Rabbeinu had to paskin. He was the chief of the Beis Din. And in order to paskin, you have to have the right information. You cannot say, well, this poor person, he stole a loaf of bread from a rich man. The rich man isn't even aware, doesn't even know what's going on in his kitchen. Like, let's just dismiss it because the poor man was hungry. But loy signov, do not steal. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. A halacha is a halacha. A mitzvah is a mitzvah. So on the level of das, yes, information is one way of avodas Hashem. But it says noshim daitan kalos. Information, they're easy. They're light on information, means information is not what they need a heavy dose of. For their avodah, for our avodah, of course, if we want to learn, for sure, learn as much Torah as you can. The Rebbe wanted women to learn and be very knowledgeable, but that's not the ikar. The ikar is for a woman, which is higher than knowledge, is avodas Hashem and avos Hashem and yiras Hashem. And when we tap into that, we could be the kohen gadol of our home, so to speak. That's not the Rebbe's words. I'm adding it in, but especially we're like the kahanim who wash. We wash away or we incorporate. And the Rebbe says that the proof that these women were doing it right in Mitzrayim was the outcome. What was the outcome? The children that were created were so holy. They recognized the Eibishter first, which means they were created with the ultimate kedusha motivation. And the same thing in our homes. The Eibishter knows our motivation, and in our bedrooms. Hashem knows where it's coming from. We want to do something to restore Shalom Bayis. We want to do something to enhance Shalom Bayis. We want to do something to make it special for one of our children or a family member. That's maybe not a clear mitzvah. It's not a black and white. It's not a formula. It's all those grays. The underlying motivation that it comes from our neshama gefil, our tmimus, like the Rebbe says in another sikha, the tmimus, that deep connection with the Eibishter, and it doesn't have to be fancy. The Rebbe says the nechoshes, it wasn't gold, it wasn't silver, it was copper, it was the cheapest of all metals that were donated. But it was the shiniest. There was not one other object that shined as shiny as the copper mirrors. That means it could be from the cheapest, but because what was that shine? That shine came from their essence. That essential deep connection with the Eibishter shone, the Shechina shone from it. Shone, whatever you say, whatever Canadian, American, English, I don't know, but that's the real shine. There's another, and you can learn the sikha on the inside. There's one more sikha I want to refer to from Teres Menachem Chilk Lamed Vav, page 368, which was said to a group of women at a convention on Chafei Iyar, Tav Shin Chav Gimel. An additional point Of course, the Rebbe, starts off by saying how these, it's from Ois Daud and forward, that the Kiyor was the woman's donation. We don't have any other kelu like that. But the Rebbe explains, again, this woman's role of washing away and elevating, the back and forth. But here the Rebbe says that the Alter Rebbe, when he talks about mirrors, says that one thing you could see yourself, a reflection of yourself in the mirror, but the Alter Rebbe adds another point that you could also see what's behind you. That means without a mirror, you could only see ahead. With a mirror, not only do you see the reflection of yourself, but you could see all the way what's going on behind you. Correct? If you look in a window, could you see what's going on behind you? No. Thank you for putting on your screens already. I'm getting full of chayas. It's so hard to talk to the wall, so to speak. So the Rebbe says the same thing in Avodah Ruchnius. When a woman also has to look behind. Here the Rebbe says it, are we making the same mistakes in the past? How was it in the past? But I like to broaden that and say, what's the trajectory? Are we continuing with the Messiah? Like, where are we heading? Don't just look ahead. Look behind. Where are we coming from? Where are we going to? And we bridge that gap through making the right decisions. That means we want to uphold the Messiah to the fullest. We came from a certain place. We want to be forward thinking. We want to be innovative, but we always have to remember, look in the past, don't make those mistakes. We want to do something new. We want to do better, but it has to be in line with our Messiah. And it's the women who have that gefühl. They could understand a choice that's being made. Is it this innovation and this forward thinking? Is it going in a different direction, or they're bridging the past and the future? So I want to end off, and afterwards I'll ask one of you to please read the Hayom Yom, and then we'll have a little for bringing or ask your questions if you like. But I want to end off with a bracha that the Rebbe says here to the woman, and the Rebbe says as follows: Va'az, and then if we do this avodah la'achei harechitza me'akir v'kanai, after we wash, we do that the avodah of washing away and then incorporating and elevating. Bituchim, we're sure sha'abaisi and mishkan, that our house will actually be a mishkan for Hashem. Bayis she'olav ye'omar, a house upon which it is said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mashra Shchinosai Boy B'chol Hashana, the Eibishter is resting his Shechina on this house the entire year. And if the Eibishter Shechina is in the house, what happens? Yachadim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we invite Hashem to be in our homes, Ba'im kol ha-brachis v'hatzlachis, all the brachis and success come along with that. Kol hadvarim hatayvim, all the good things, v'hamukrochim, and all the blessed things. Shanoitzim l'chol echad v'achas, the Eibusher gives every single person in this house, mikatan, from the young v'ad gadol to the old. Sha'abayis yiyeh mevayach b'chol hamitzarich, the house should be full of, benched with whatever is needed. Hein begashmius, hein beruchnius, in physical matters and in spiritual matters. The gashmis of the house and the whatever's connected to the neshama life, the life and chayis of the neshama of every single yid. Yazer Hashem Yisbarach Ol Achas Mikan, the Eibusher should help every one of you. B'seichei Klal Yisrael, among all the Yidden, Neshei Yisrael, V'chol Echad Yisrael, women and everyone else. L'malei ha'avodah chi hashuva, that we should be zeicher to fulfill this most important avodah. Lahavdil es ha'rechayiv min habayis ha'yehudi, to make a distinction between the outside, the street, and between this Jewish home. V'az niska kolonu l'brachasi shel Kadosh Baruch Hu, then altogether we'll be zeicher to the bracha of the Eibishter, sheyisher b'chol echad v'achas meshach kol hashana v'yitin brachasi v'atzkol chasei shetiya shana bria shana smecha begashmis v'ruchnius, that the Eibishter will bench us, that not only we rest the entire year in our homes, because again, the women came once a year to this convention, but this should be a healthy year, a happy year, begashmius and beruchnius. Would somebody please like to read the Hayom Yom, if you can unmute yourself?
Okay, so you want me to, everyone should be able to unmute themselves now? Okay, I'll allow participants to unmute yourself. You can unmute yourself, everybody.
Who's reading the Hayom Yom?
I could read it. Thank you. That was beautiful. Which language do you prefer?
Both, the original and the translation. That would be the best.
Okay. Rabbeinu Hazaken Amar. Betrumas Hamishkan Hayuza v'kesef and Achayches v'loi Hayadavar Hamavrik Zulas Marais Hatzva'is shemehen nasu hakir v'kanai. Hakir v'kanai heim habaim b'achroina mikol klei hamishkan v'tashmisha hu b'roish kol avodas hamishkan ki na'ot tchilasan v'soifan. Now, the Rebbe once taught the contribution towards the construction of the Mishkan included gold, silver, and copper, but the only item that's shown were the woman's copper mirrors from which the basin and its stand were made. And though the basin and its stand are listed last among all the holy vessels, they were used before all the services in the Mishkan. For the beginning is rooted in the end, which is amazing. Did you know this, Hayayman, before you chose the date to do the Sikha?
Not at all. I woke up this morning and I saw the Hashgacha
I thought you're not only organized, you have the calendar and the information coordinated in a beautiful way. Amazing.
Hashem is my party planner and my coordinator. And just like we see it, the Hashgacha Pratis in this, we believe Hashem is putting all the pieces in place for all the other parts, the moving parts in our lives. So here we saw it openly, Baruch Hashem. But I just find it fascinating that it's so connected to the role of a woman, of bringing Hashem in every time, in every space, in every unique way. It's such a feminine avodah. It's just so fascinating how the mirror, that it's so much more valued in Hashem's eyes. And I would think nowadays in this generation, it's so much more prevalent than ever before. If we look at our surroundings or look at our students or our children or ourselves, there's so much more of those questions. You know, when I want to say one more time is Li'il Nishmas, my dear nephew, Ori Nissen Olav Shalom ben Rabbi Menachem Mendel Sheyichya L'Oirich Yamim V'Shanim Tovos. Have a good day.